Right, you should be
So
spotlighted.
we are
Right.
spotlighted. That's wonderful. This, as people can see, the mighty, wonderful Jess Steele. I feel like I should give you your prefix and suffix, Jess. Dr. Jess Steele, MBE, and all that sort of thing.
Not M.
Is it not? What is it? OBE.
Oh, yeah. You shouldn't do that.
I always push people one step up. Although whether we want to be orders of the British Empire and that kind of thing is a whole other
No,
question, right?
exactly. There is a whole, yes. I took it on behalf of, because it was for services to the two community assets in the UK. And I felt that that was a good thing to be honoured. And also my dad was really proud. So I couldn't kind of say no to that.
Good to know that parents have a role in this. We are being joined, folks, by Jess on the day that she's then off to her hen do, actually. So she's gonna depart promptly at the end of this. So big congratulations and exciting news, and thank you for making time on such a day to spend with us. I think we're going to start and dive in. There's still people coming into the room, and please do keep posting where you're at, folks. A train into Newport, Wales. That sounds like we've got someone in Wurundjeri country and Melbourne. Thank you, Helen, for joining us. Got people learning from all over the world. That's very exciting. So today, Citizen Spotlight with Hastings Commons and Jess Steele. I'm just going to start us off by saying a little bit, as always, about what Citizen Collective is and what this is part of, just to set the context. And then a word or two about how we're going to run the session today, in case this is the first one you've been to. So Citizen Collective has been going since about September last year, an experiment really in bringing together people from all over the world, as you can see from the chat, but with a commitment that is building the future, building a citizen future, a future where actually we're working from the logic that all of us are smarter than any of us, and that's how we build the world we want, rather than logics that I talk about as the subject and the consumer. So that there isn't a God-given few who are going to lead us to the best outcomes, and we're not going to get to the future we want just by aggregating self-interest, which is the kind of consumer logic. This is the logic of all of us are smarter than any of us, that we can lean in and step in and build together. And that makes Jess Steele a wonderful guest for us, as you will hear in a moment. The way we're going to do the conversation today is that we will be talking for about half an hour, 35 minutes. We will then go into some breakout groups, just to give you a chance to talk to one another, meet one another. That's a big part of the motivation of Citizen Collective. But we are very clear that some people will be calling in from work. Some people are more introvert than others and don't fancy that conversation. So I think that's all of my opening notices. And you've all had enough of the drum roll, so let's get into our Citizen Spotlight. Hooray! So Jess, welcome. Thank you, as ever, for making some time to spend with me. The way as I said, we like to do these things by sort of starting with a bit of a sense of what's going on now, like paint the picture for us, help us understand what Hastings Commons is, where you're up to, what it's like to be in the White Rock neighbourhood of Hastings, and then as we move through the conversation, we'll get a bit more into how did you get there, and what's the dream for what next. But yeah, let's start with what even is going on, because it's pretty cool.
Well, thanks, John. Thanks for inviting me. Normally I come and do a whole presentation. I'm very much a sort of historian, so I tell the whole story from the past to the present and into the what next. But you've challenged me to say, well, what is it? What is it now? So I'd say Hastings Commons is a long-term experiment in whether groups of local people can renovate their own places. And when I say renovate, I mean everything from harnessing the resources, enacting property, so actually achieving property, harnessing the resources, the physical renovation, but very much the sort of social darning of the fabric of their place. So I always talk about darning the fabric because I believe, and the Commons is founded on the idea that we make use of what we've already got. That we build on the assets we've got, for so many different reasons. So we have a huge climate commitment. It's about retrofit on the one hand, but it's also about community pride and civic pride, personal pride, and identity of place. It's also about heritage and protecting the heritage that we're going to hand over in the future. So there's so many reasons to don the fabric, and yet we have this slash and burn approach that happens all around us. And it's a combination of slash and burn or leave to rot. So when you say what is it like in the White Rock area, for
and just situate us as well. So Hastings is a coastal town, south coast of the UK.
Yeah, 90,000 population, so quite a big town, but right on the edge and very peripheral in that sense. We have been we've suffered from, but also been kind of protected by a terrible railway, a terrible road, and a terrible reputation for many, many years. And those three things together have protected Hastings and made it a very quirky, affordable, and therefore able to be quirky and diverse place where people could afford to live, they could afford to start a project, they could afford to be in a band, they could be an artist, they could do stuff. And survive, and more than survive, thrive and build a great community spirit. So Hastings has a fantastically strong spirit, which kind of, I don't know whether it's a myth, but we draw on our sort of the fishing fleet heritage. We draw on pirates, smugglers, and these are real parts of the history. But also some really interesting history, specifically in the White Rock neighbourhood of Hastings, where 1,000 years ago, it was actually underwater. It was part of the sea. And then over the centuries, it silted up, became land, became beach, and people began to build on it and live on it. And because nobody owned it, they didn't pay any rent or rates. So over the years, 1,000 people ended up living and working on this piece of land by the 1820s. And then there was a royal commission to decide who owned the land. Surprise, surprise, the Crown decided it owned the land.
We're going to have a royal commission. The Crown is going to decide who owns the land. Oh, look, the Crown owns the land.
Exactly. So they sent out the rent bills, and basically that whole community was displaced. And the legend goes that they raised the Stars and Stripes, the American flag, and declared independence. They declared themselves the 24th state of the United States of America, which had fairly recently become independent. So interesting history. So that area is known as the America Ground, and in a way that's our founding myth, because that is an example of where people lost land, where a whole community was displaced. And part of the deal with Hastings Commons is, how do you not get displaced? How do you actually take the property into community ownership so that it's decommodified, it's removed from the market? Because what we had experienced in White Rock was years and years of dereliction, where the local industry, which was a big print factory and publishing empire, really, a whole set of buildings, had closed in the 80s with the change in technology and fairly terrible industrial relations that some people might remember from the 80s. It closed down, and then it spent 35 years being the epitome of what's wrong with our property system. And there will be examples of this everywhere where people are, of a building that is just stuck. And it had 13 different owners, one after another, and most of them made money out of it. They got planning permission and sold it on. There's not a single repair. So that kind of thing, that became a cycle that was very hard to break. And the only way it could be broken, I believe, and I think we've proven, is through a combination of socially driven, community-rooted entrepreneurs and a long-term, forever community organisation, which in our case is the Community Land Trust, Hastings Commons Community Land Trust. And it's that combination that has created what we've got, which is basically right now, I can just show you a very quick picture of our share. The buildings we've got right now. So you can see they're all very close together. They are clustered in this area. This is the area of the America Ground that used to be underwater.
So the beach is down the bottom, so that's the sea.
Yeah, now
And
it
then
is. So yeah, they were.
and then all of these the colours and the list down the left-hand side. So those are all the buildings that Hastings Commons owns.
Yes, in various kind of ways, but mostly freeholds. Some of them are on what we call a development lease, where we do a negotiation with the owner and take on a lease for a fixed period of time, perhaps 2 years, which has an option to buy alongside the lease.
I'll just pause you there because I want to ask a word about the development lease. I think that's really fascinating. But could you just spell out a little bit more so what these 12 buildings are, just to give people a sense of what you've taken on in this area, and then
Sure.
we'll maybe come back to that structure if that's all right.
Yeah, these are so we began with Rock House. Rock House is a 9-story office block, which was built in 1969 as an extension to the historic Observer building, which I can show you in a moment, which is the blue one there. In fact, it's all very well having a map, but let me just see. Oops. There's an image of the neighbourhood, and Rock House is that one in the centre there with a nice halo around it, which that's the first one. And when we bought Rock House in 2014, so just over 10 years ago now. Vacant possession, great big 9-story 70s style block, and we had a report from a quantity surveyor saying it would cost 1.9 million to renovate it, to convert it to what we wanted, which was mixed use, affordable homes, affordable workspace, and some social spaces. 1.9 million, we had £80,000. And so I always say we threw
Full
away.
discrepancy.
Yeah, threw away the report because it was completely pointless to us, and got on with renovating the first couple of floors with that 80,000 and bringing people in. And this approach, as we've looked back on it, called it phased organic development. And it's really about occupying the space that you can as soon as you can, and building the capacity by building new sort of tenants into the team. They become your ambassadors, as well as paying a bit of rent and keeping the lights on and beginning to bring in their friends and everyone they know. And therefore you can start to build and shape the future of that single building. 5 years on, we'd completed that, and that enabled us to, and we'd also bought or acquired in different ways several others, including a set of caves, this orange one that says C, set of caves in the cliff, a tumble down old stable, a beautiful old community building, really built in the 1870s, the Claremont Rooms. And so we'd acquired these various different spaces, but eventually we managed to acquire, I think, the Observer building there. So that's a huge 4,000 square meters of dereliction that had been abandoned and, well, had not been abandoned. Basically, owners were what I call farming the dereliction. They were making money out of it while it remained completely derelict. And that is, unfortunately, something that we see all over the country.
And then just spell out how that works. So they were taking ownership of it, getting planning permission to do something that people could then invest in, but then not doing it.
Well, the whole point about planning permission that I think not enough people understand is that planning permission is value in its own right. A certain number of consented units is currency. It's real money. And every time a planning permission is granted, or most times a planning permission is granted, it creates value overnight at that meeting, at that committee meeting. Value is added to the building without actually anything happening. And fascinatingly, you can create totally undeliverable value. So, the previous applications have had 5 stories added on top, and they've ignored the fact that the building actually slopes inwards, and therefore the footprint gets smaller. They've just ignored that and just drawn it as if it goes straight up. And I've said to the engineers, is that doable? And they say, well, everything's doable if you spend £100 million, but it's crazy, it's undeliverable. But the planning system doesn't mind that. It assumes that developers will only put in things that they can deliver, which is a completely wrong assumption.
And so you got to the point just on the Observer building, this glorious, this was the former Printworks, right? This was the big factory. and you got to the point, and by the way, folks, I've been to visit this and seen it and walked on the roof with Jess, and there's going to be a roof terrace with a bar overlooking the sea. So, and this is actually going to happen. Look at this thing.
We've done the first floors. The lower 4 floors are renovated already. The roof is just being completed at the moment. The bit that we're really stuck on at the moment is putting the homes into here. We want to put 12 affordable homes, but a combination of, well, various crises and especially the Building Safety Act, which has become too widely, in my view, much too widely applied, which means it's not working to protect the actually dangerous buildings. It's just completely changing the industry without anyone really wanting that or knowing how to deal with that. That is at the moment causing us difficulty with putting in the homes, but we will one day eventually.
I've just seen that Bernie, the European co-working champion of all glory, is on the call, and he just posted there needs to be a co-working space in there. There is, Bernie, and it's wonderful. There is. Should we? Would you mind? Is there anything else you'd like to show, Jess? I'd love to sort of, or if so, then look up a.
No, I'll stop there. I'll just
nice.
leave
let's let people see you in your full glory again.
Yeah.
So this is so just to sort of sum this up. So we've got 12 buildings in this neighbourhood, all essentially in commons community ownership, that are and some really dramatic ones. So iconic building, the Observer building, these caves that and so let's just, I want to underline a couple of things before we then sort of take a little bit of a step back and into, actually one thing before we then take a step back and go into sort of how did you get there, and maybe, because this can sound so big and so impressive that it feels far away from people, and actually it started very humbly and with a lot of determination. So we'll come back to that in a moment. But I just want to go to the development lease specifically, because this I think is really fascinating. And so as I understand it, you're sort of going, what happens a lot of the time with community ownership in early stage is that a community can take hold of a space almost for meantime use, sometimes just temporarily take hold, but increase the value of it by what they're doing in there, and then effectively kind of price themselves out of it. So I know this is what happened actually with Imicor and the folks at Impact Hub Birmingham. They took the first lease they took for a few years was very low cost, and then what they did was so creative and so generative that people started to move into that area, and they were a key part of raising the value of the land. And then when the lease came up for renewal, the landlord was like, well, seems like you're going to have to pay market rate. And so you've this development lease structure, which you basically go on.
Well, I was just going to say the development lease is one tool. I think everything that we do is in reaction to what you just described, because kind of anti-gentrification, or at least an alternative to the false choice of you can gentrify or you can decline. That's what we're trying to create with everything we do. And I have watched for too many years, we all have, artists, creatives, and community people of all kinds adding value to other people's land and buildings and whole neighborhoods, and being priced out, being displaced. And so this approach is all about what can we do? We can try and actually enact the property. Enacting property is the key to it, making that move from being just a user of property in an environment and a system which treats users very badly and owners very well. We need to become owners, and therefore have the choices. So we use I always talk about abducting the tools of capitalism. We use some of capitalism's cleverest tools: freehold, debt finance, company structures, landlord-tenant relations, and we subvert them all and use them for different purpose.
So let's go through this in the case of the Observer building then. So the Observer building, it got to the point where these rounds of planning permission had ended up valuing the property at something ridiculous, right?
Well, but in 2012, 2012, it got to £4.2 million for an entirely derelict building on a scruffy corner in a seaside town that was you know, the poorest in the southeast. So it was crazy. Do you want me to tell you the story about this?
Yeah, and I think if you can like weave the development lease into this, because that's how you manage to sort of, and this
What we,
idea of phased organic development, right?
yeah, so I mean, so in 2012, we were trying to, we being local people, brought together through the White Rock Trust, which had a heritage of having saved the pier. So there were lots of people involved, and the next step was looking at the rest of the neighbourhood. So at that point, the building was valued at 4.2 million, and it was held by a bank, Investec Bank, who had taken it from the person they'd lent money on it to, who had turned out to be a fraudster. He ended up in prison. They ended up holding this baby for 4.2 million pounds. And when they came down to see us, we said to them, look, it's clearly not worth 4.2 million. And they said, well, the problem is if we accept that, we'll crystallize the loss and lose our bonuses. I was like, okay, so that was the situation. So then you've just got to try everything. So at that stage, we campaigned with the council to get them to do a compulsory purchase order, at least threaten one. They did a very gentle threat, and 2 weeks later, the building went up for auction with a guide price of £150,000. So suddenly, it was a completely different situation. Unfortunately, at that point, we definitely tried to buy it. We were unable to buy it at that point. Someone else bought it, another private owner bought it. To be fair, he was very different from a lot of the previous ones, but nevertheless did not manage to see it through. He ended up selling it to us 5 years later. In the meantime, in the meantime, we missed out on that. Instead, we had taken earlier a £200 a month license, a meanwhile lease on a garage in just next to the Observer building in this alley of dereliction. It was very, very strange, secret, beautiful in some ways, space, but a space that hardly anyone knew about. And that was the point. We wanted to bring the community into that and start talking about how can we change this? What can we do? Both the alley and this derelict building looming over it. So £200 a month. Meanwhile, lease, no risk really at all. Lots and lots of events, drop-ins, lots of people coming. And then about 5 or 6 months in, the agent phoned up that we'd done the lease deal with and said, do you want to buy the whole building? And it's very much a case of kind of being in the right place, right time with the right attitude. And the reason we were in the right place at the right time was simply that early lease, you know. So I always say to groups, like, if you've got big ambitions, just start with something. Just get yourself a space, whether it's, you know, begged or borrowed or paid a small amount of money. Get yourself a space and start doing stuff. And it's amazing how things will then, opportunities will arise. And then it's a question of, well, what do you say when the agent phones up and says, do you want to buy it? So at that point, we had to pull together a whole set of different, we had to try and find some money. And the we at that point was the White Rock Trust, the local organisation, but also 2 social entrepreneurs. Myself, so I was a volunteer at the trust, but I was in my own company, Jericho Road Solutions. I had set out to help local leaders around the country to take on challenging projects, try and get paid for that, use any surplus to invest in a project in Hastings. So I was up and ready for doing something there. And I was working closely with Meanwhile Space, community interest company, and they were trying to find a long-term base, because for exactly the reasons you said earlier, they do brilliant work, but they transform other people's spaces, and it can be frustrating. And so they wanted to bring all of their meanwhile energy and thriftiness and impatience to a long-term project. And so that's why we came together. The 3 partners then came together, and Jericho and Meanwhile were able to bring some money to that table. And White Rock Trust were given 10% of the shares straight away. Over time, we equalised that. And over time, the body changed to being the Community Land Trust, and is now Hastings Commons Community Land Trust. And now we own, because we set up that first company and own it together, that company, Neighbourhood Ventures, has been the continual organisation that has continued to buy and develop. But it doesn't just do that, it also does all of the leasing, all of the caretaking, and all of the sort of pastoral care of the tenants, and the encouragement to commoning and so on. And then it works alongside the Community Land Trust, which has a large membership of 700 at the moment. I hope many thousands in the future.
Very powerful. I just want to there's so much in what you've done, and we're not going to get across all of it, and I want to make sure we have a bit of time for you to share a bit of what's going on and looking to the future. But just if you could just draw out the specifics of the development lease and how that structure works.
That was invented for a particular building that we really wanted to take on, and the owner really wanted to sell it to us. Local businessman, wanted to retire, loved the idea of selling it to us. We couldn't raise the money. It's hard raising the money. We've had more than 109, I think it's 110 now, separate funding awards in the 10 years, grant and loan awards of various kinds. But trying to raise the money, that we had an offer of a loan, but it was 7.5%. We knew there was possible grant coming along from the town deal, but it was going to take time. It was going to take 6 months, 12 months. We didn't know how long. And so we offered the owner this idea of a development lease. We would pay him, I think it was 22,000 a year for this enormous building, but very scruffy building, but big. And we would be able to do what we liked in it, more or less. And we would have an option to purchase at a fixed price within the life of the lease, so within the 2 years. And what that meant was we could just get in there, get on with it, and open a public living room, which was a brilliant thing. We didn't know whether it would work at all, but it worked brilliantly, especially because it was just after COVID. And so people were needing to come back together, and it was great.
If people want to look up public living rooms, do check out Camerados, and Math Potts has got a new book, Friends in Purpose, I think it's called, something like that. So maybe we'll post the links in the chat so you can find out a bit more about that. But yeah, sorry, carry on.
Math was a great inspiration for this. He came down to an event in 2019 in Hastings, and with others, inspirational people like him, and a lot of those things have happened since in Hastings.
So there's a whole thing about just gather everyone and pop stuff in, and
it was called the Common Treasury of Adaptable Ideas. It's literally get people down and let's think whether we can adapt that for Hastings. So the development lease was crucial, because when the grant did eventually come along, it meant that we were in a position to say to the funder, if you give us this money, we can buy this building tomorrow, because we are, here's our option agreement. We can literally just do that freehold transfer.
And did that, is a development lease a thing, or did you invent that? Or
I'm pretty sure, I don't know. I mean, an option to buy is a thing and a lease is a thing. We called it a development lease, attached them to each other, and we called it something so boring so that it wasn't scary. So we didn't want to call it the kind of community this, that, or the other.
The community transformation package.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the community takes your property off you. And of course it didn't. I mean, it's a win-win. The owner was very pleased with it. He got a little bit of income while he was waiting, and he was perfectly happy to wait. And if we had failed, he would have sold the building, when the time had come. We are currently, though, in development lease situations with 2 other buildings, and one of them is about to run out. And in fact has been extended once. And so they don't always work, because it is harder and harder to get access to capital. It's really difficult, and it's crazy. We keep winning awards, and people keep saying how lovely we are, and what a fabulous beacon of this is how we should all be doing it. It's too hard at the moment. The money is not, the money that's available is not the right sort of money. We need access, and I mean here, anybody doing this kind of work, we need access to good, fast money that can respond quickly, but really to long-term. This is all about long-term neighbourhood transformation. And we need long-term money, pension money, mortgage money, money that is interested in the long term. But we're kind of too small, we're seen as too risky. And yet this is the most important kind of work, this darning of the fabric, and not siloing it into, this is about housing, or this is about employment, or something. This is about everything. This is about place.
Yeah. There's two there's two things that I really want you to tell everybody about that are sort of that I know are in the works. The Mycelial Network a little bit, if you wouldn't mind mentioning, and also your plans for the Commons Learning Centre. I really want to get into people's minds. I know they're early stage, but I'd love to have them mentioned. But just before we go there, I'm just gonna sort of summarize and just draw out a few things that we've heard. So because I think it's really important, the scale of this and the creativity and these ideas like a development lease that you're very humble about, but you have basically created a whole new financial instrument, I'm afraid. Just go with it, Jess, take it. And I think it's phenomenal. But what I also want to underline is that it begins with that £200 garage lease, right? And I think the way you put that, what you always say is just start with something, start with a space, start bringing things together, adapt ideas to that thing, and then try and then be in the right place at the right time with that spirit of, I think you call it sustained impatience, don't you?
Yes, absolutely. Dogged determination, sustained impatience.
So let's look to the future a little bit and what you're doing. So those two things, because you've outlined a bit of the systemic challenge, the fact that the this money isn't right, and I know that you're part of starting to organise across this. And those who've attended all of our Citizen Spotlights will have met the folks will have met Ian and Dina from Colville Can, who I know are also part of that. But you're bringing people together. You're part of coming together across the country to try and pull some of this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We got inspired, well, a group of us, some of us have known each other a long time. I think this world is good at connecting, at making connections, but in some ways we're all very busy and we're scattered across the country. COVID, in a sense, or Zoom, was very useful for that. It changed the situation. So instead of us only ever meeting each other at other people's conferences, sort of convened, usefully convened by locality or Power to Change, whatever, instead of that being a kind of once or twice a year thing, we were able to connect much more easily online. And then we came together as a residential, 25 separate community asset developers, people like us, with multiple assets or aiming for neighborhood transformation rather than, I wouldn't say just, but rather than like a village pub or a village shop, a single building kind of thing. We came together and we became extremely inspired by the metaphor of mycelium. And I know lots of people have been inspired by mycelium over the last decade. What really hooked me in the end was the New Constellations work, where instead of doing what I do and just kind of Googling it and thinking, oh, that's interesting, they actually went and spoke to mycologists and they got the real detail, the ecological principles of how mycelium works, and created from that social principles about how we might work as people, as a civilization, and how different civilization might be if humans had been able to see mycelium properly, like they could see lions and tigers and dog eat dog and that kind of scale of nature. So the mycelial network is a kind of philosophy, but it's also an incredibly practical grouping of people and very amorphous. It's got lots of core people, but then it's always bringing new people in. It's not something you join like with a membership fee or something. It's more just like commoning. It's more something you do, you participate in, you become part of. But practically what we're doing is a series of missions, two of them being about long-term money. So one kind of 10-year grant funding, potentially philanthropic or government funding, to keep the team in the neighborhood, because you cannot take opportunities like we have if you have literally nobody to do that. If you have no staff at all, you won't get there. So you have to have a small core team in a place where the community is willing, where it's showing willing. I'm not talking about imposing teams on places, definitely not, but where people are doing stuff, long-term support for them. And then the other side is, can we break into this wall of pension fund money, this huge amount of asset-seeking money, to try to, and long-term asset-seeking money? Can we turn that tap on for social good at neighborhood level? And that really involves working closely with pension funds, mortgage lenders, etc., to understand both ways, for us to understand from them exactly what they need, what their due diligence is, and for them to understand from us what the risks and rewards of this world is.
And I think
Should I say about the hosting centre?
yeah, just but one sentence before that, because I just want to emphasize the way that you're doing that, starting to kind of try and pool all of the assets that you've got in order to create a much bigger amount of money that can actually, or a whole list of assets and a big number that then could be pooled, so it's on the radar of that kind of institution, right?
That's right. One of the biggest issues is scale, and so at our tiny scale, call it ambitious, but it is very, very small scale. We can't probably access that, whereas collectively. So we're certainly not talking about kind of giving away community assets to something else. What we're talking about is aggregating or mutualizing. So having a sort of mutual charge over the assets, which can draw down money for each of
Collecting the collectives.
Yes.
So yes, before we go to breakout groups,
Yeah.
hosting centre.
So my, as I said earlier, we've been winning prizes. We want to be a beacon. We want to be more than just the fine grain area of Hastings where we work, and I think we are more than that. And part of that is hosting people to come and be with us and learn from us, and part of it is bringing people to come so that we can learn from them, and they can learn from each other. And so the International Hosting Centre for the Commons and community-led regeneration and all of this kind of work is under development at the moment. So it'll be a rooted place. It will be based in Hastings. I hope that there'll be lots more across the mycelial network eventually, but certainly this is a kind of starting point. And I hope that everybody on this call will at some point want to spend some time there. It'll be a chance for training in a way, some formal training, but much more for bonding, for sharing, and for relaxing. Because at the end of the day, Hastings is an absolutely wonderful place, and you can come and do sea swimming or climb our hills or ride along the seafront, as well as meeting each other from all over.
And learning how to transform neighborhoods with very boring sounding financial instruments.
Yeah.
Okay, folks. This is so, and I think you can all get the sense of why a hosting centre and some proper time spent with people like Jess and with each other is likely to be needed, rather than just an hour-long call on a Tuesday morning. But an hour-long call on a Tuesday morning is what we have for now. Welcome back, folks, as they start to trickle back in. As you come back in, we're not going to be able, I don't think, to hear from every group, because there are more groups than I was anticipating, because everybody's here. So if there's anything that you want to post in the chat as a question, we will make sure that Jess gets, or a comment or an idea, then please do. We'll hear from a few folk though. Does anyone have something that they talked about that they'd really love to bring into the space? Or I've been so discouraging that I've ruined it. Go on.
I've got a quick something. I mean, sadly, I dropped out of my group a little bit early because my phone overheated. But it was. I've done a lot of work in the social enterprise. I've done a lot of work in the startup world, and I've done work in the meanwhile space. And I've set up a couple of community-owned things, or things that hold community asset transfer leases. And all the time, the common thing is, like, I've sat across a lot of tables with people who are starting up. And there's a real challenge in terms of like having the tools to be able to understand the business model, understand where the money's coming from, understand where to get started, and also to like handle some of these really kind of like gritty and unwieldy things like leases, having to speak to property people. It's all like dry, difficult stuff, which is actually quite different to the culture of the people who are coming into this space a lot of the time. And there's a challenge on that sort of funnel to actually get people in to be able to start out those ideas quickly and effectively and get traction.
So the sort of a comment about the tension between the spirit of the doing and the energy of that and interacting with some of these quite heavy, dry structures. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, finding the way of actually getting from idea to this will work and it's actually able to pay us as quickly as possible.
Okay, great. Thanks, Daniel. Gemma, you've got your hand up. Let's hear a word from you.
Thanks. I just wanted to share. I came along because I am relatively local to Hastings, but also I am a trustee of a charity which has got is lease a building from the council, which is underused in the next town from me. And the council leases a building from it in my town, which is also unused, and they're both in very socially marginalised areas. In the last few weeks, I've kind of just got a bit curious, inspired by your work, John, mostly, and Cormac Russell, and just trying to have some conversations with people about the community assets and how the spaces might be used, or behind the back of the board who just want to do really boring finance stuff and they're in stalemate with the council about the leases. So yeah, it's just really inspired me. So thank you, Jess, just to start somewhere. I've started somewhere and I'm now going to carry on. Thank you very much.
Lovely stuff. That's what we like to hear. Is there one more contribution from the floor that we can hear? I actually want Dean Cracknell to say a word. I've just spotted him in the room. And Dean, what you're doing in Town Team, we had a spotlight with Town Team recently. Dean wasn't able to join us, but Dean, would you just offer a reflection and maybe say a word about how this is sounding to you and the relative, like how this land is the same situation in Australia, or yeah, what are you thinking?
Well, apologies, I was horribly late, but I'd love to catch up on most of the call that I missed. But yeah, we're trying to help local people to create the change that they want to create. So we've got a whole bunch of resources, most of which are free for community volunteers. So happy to share any of that. But yeah, I think some of these practical issues are the real challenges to collectively find ways of getting around or finding new ways of doing things. So we can provide a lot of advice from over here, but I think it's fairly similar to what you're probably facing in the UK.
Thanks, Dean. Yeah, the placemaking education work that Dean's been part of is really phenomenal, and I would encourage people to watch the Town Team Spotlight if you get a chance. We'll make sure you have all the links, of course. And then there's a lovely thing in the chat. So Jess, I'm going to come to you for closing thoughts, and then we'll do a couple of announcements in a moment. But lovely, loads of offers and thoughts in the chat about pension holders and things like that. We'll make sure you have all of this, Jess. And a nice question from Harrison, who I know has been working with in a lot of big developer organizations. I've had a couple of exchanges with him talking about how they can start to learn and support as well. So some really good stuff there. But yeah, Jess, so Tamsin, if you can let Dean run away again, and then we'll give Jess the floor for any closing sort of thoughts and reflections, and then we'll make one or two announcements and send you off to your days.
It was a brilliant session. Thank you. I really enjoyed the breakout as well. I think I would say most people who do this, including myself, have never done it before. And so it's really important not to be put off by the dry stuff or the technical stuff or whatever. What we have when we set out to do this kind of work is enough. We have our own local intelligence. We have our own grassroots connections. We have enough to do it. No one else is going to do it. No one else is better placed to do it. So don't ever let anybody say you don't have the capacity to do it. You don't have the capability to do it. This work is about agency and power. It's about believing in collective solutions and believing in ourselves collectively. Exactly. I mean, I'm not doing this just for you, John, but I know it fits. But it is. I believe in this, and this is what it's about. Commoning is about stepping up together to both enjoy and take responsibility, to do both of those things in a collective way. It's not easy, and I would end with a bit of a plea, especially because of what was asked in the thing about how can we help, Harrison's question. We need your help. We need everybody's help at the moment. I don't want to give you the impression that it's easy or that we are some kind of great success that's all finished and complete. We're still very much trying to get to steady state where the buildings are earning more than they're costing. We are not sustainable right now. We are still in the middle, in a sense, of the journey. And we are going to probably, I always think it's really important to ask for help and to not pretend that everything's fine, until it's too late. So we will be coming out in the next few months explaining what it will take to get to steady state. And that's for Hastings Commons. But once we can, I think it's essential now that Hastings Commons is not allowed to fail. that it does get to steady state for Hastings, but also for the movement more generally. I do
Love
think it's important that we look after it more collectively, not just local people.
And I'm gonna be doing everything I can as well. And that sort of the spirit. What would you? One last sentence from you, just very quickly. Like, if you were asked the question, if someone was on this call who hasn't got started yet, but is like, I wanna do something in my place. What's the very first thing to do?
We were talking about this in the breakout. My background is community organising. You spend time there. You look for where the animation is, where the animated discussions are happening, who cares about what, and you ask people what they care about. Not for market research. It's not about research. It's about starting to talk to people about what we care about mutually. And those conversations will lead you into the next step. If you have enough of those conversations in enough of the place, in pubs and cafes and in the street and markets, wherever you find people, that will lead you down this route in the end.
Love it. Thank you. So, folks, we're going to wrap up. We try and wrap on time with these calls. I'm just going to say again that we will be having some open reflection calls and sharing some of our thoughts about what we're going to do next with Citizen Collective very soon. So if you're on either my mailing list on johnalexander.net or the Citizen Collective mailing list, which Tamsin will post, we will be sending out invitations and dates for those very soon. And I will also say that there is a call tomorrow night, which is going to be wonderful. We're going to post the link for registration for that. It's at 8 p.m. tomorrow. It's going to be a storytelling workshop with a wonderful man called Matt Golding, who has been telling the stories of a lot of these kinds of organizations. I'm going to, in case anyone has to go on the dot of 11, I just want to make sure that we post the link to that, to register for that in the chat, and make sure you know that it's going to be wonderful and that it's at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. And then if you can stay for a minute, if Dave can as well, I'm going to ask Dave to close us out just by saying a word more about what that workshop is going to be. So Dave, but thank you so much, Jess. Then Dave, come in and tell us a word about that, and then we'll
really thanks, Jess, as ever. Thanks, John. And as some of you will know, we run these monthly Citizen Collective workshops, which are about getting on with building the future. And for this one, in a way, it's like a prototype of the hosting center that Jess was talking about. We've got Matt from Antidote, who are brilliant, and Matt's going to come along and tell us very practically how to tell the story of what you're doing and what you want to do in a way that it will actually stick and get some leverage in your community. He is absolutely brilliant, and Antidote are amazing at what they're doing. So yeah, 8 p.m. UK time tomorrow night. Come and actually get better at telling the stories that you already have.
I'm going to be there. We can all always get better at the storytelling, but thank you all. Thank you, Jess, for being with us.